Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the program that I host on a fairly regular basis. It's a podcast and a broadcast, and it's a video cast. It's Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. See, I thought I would change it up just a little bit because, you say the same things over and over and over again, and people get tired of hearing the same things over and over again. So let's change it up a little bit. Why not? As a matter of fact, we'll change it up so much that all that other stuff that I tell you about that takes about a minute and a half to share with you? I'm going to wait. We'll sprinkle it around in this program, and I hope that you will stay tuned to hear some of these other messages. But today, we're going places, folks. We're going on an Odyssey. I'm not exactly sure what kind of an Odyssey it is, although I do know that it is has to do with the alchemical power of the spaces between. Between what? Well, guess what? We're going to have to wait and talk to our guest. We are going to talk to her about her book, The Liminal Odyssey. LiminalOdyssey.com is the, what do I want to say? That's the website. I'm losing track of things, folks. Sandy Hart is my guest. She is the author. Sandy, I want to thank you so much for being a part of what we do here to change the world and make the world a better place for everybody. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So when we talk about the Liminal Odyssey, again, the subtitle, The Alchemical Power of the Spaces in Between, I love defining terms. So that's where we're going to start. I think we have a pretty good idea of what an Odyssey is. And it's not just a trip, is it?
No, it's a deep exploration into the wild new frontier. And we get to chart its path.
Kind of like space, the final frontier, these are the voyages?
That is exactly the image I had in my head when the title came to me. Exactly. Sailing through space into uncharted territories, exactly.
Well, and that takes us to the next word we wanted to define. Some people would say, well, the most logical word would be, alchemical. And then go ahead and let's put alchemical and the power. Alchemical power is, just out of curiosity, because everybody's worried about people wanting to shift over to electric. Well, you've got to generate electric with something. Well, there are all kinds of different ways, and I thought Tesla had it really well, that it's free. It's just in the air. What is alchemical power?
Yeah, well, power is energy, right? It's basically, and if you're using power right, it's the efficiency of power. But the power that we all have, and that power to transform and to shift and to guide us into that wild frontier. And the word liminal, alchemical, sorry, the word alchemical, we know alchemists are those that are known to turn metals into gold. They transform a collective unit of things into something else.
Okay.
That's what it means to alchemize something, to transform it. And what we mean by that in my world, when we're talking about alchemy, and there's a whole field of thought on those who are who use that language, it's very alchemical, or we want to alchemize something. We're talking about, taking something from its status quo and alchemizing it, transforming it, expanding it to its highest possibility. And that possibility that might be encoded in it, whatever it is, if let's say it's a seed in the ground, there's an alchemical process when that seed breaks down and disintegrates before it breaks through the darkness of the soil and becomes what it's encoded to be, which could be a potential forest. That is alchemical power. But if we tried to determine what that power was in that seed, we couldn't imagine it. So there's a process of alchemizing something to its highest power to really see it manifest into its absolute, I call it a divine assignment, its planetary assignment, whatever it is encoded to do. It gets to go out into the world and do it through an alchemical process.
All right. And of course, we're kind of doing that almost like on a daily basis. We're combining different elements, maybe not necessarily in a chemistry format, but, for example, here we are. I've got light, I've got sound, I have a computer, camera, microphone, console, all of these different things coming together, then combining you and I for this conversation that we're having. So would I be fairly accurate in saying that we are in the process, and as I do these interviews every time, I'm in the process of an alchemical experience, if you will?
Absolutely, because it's what you do with the ingredients.
Yeah.
It's what you are bringing up, what words you are using. And we all have these alchemical potential moments throughout our entire day. Yeah, for sure.
All right, so now we're going to move on to another understanding here, a defining. You talk about the spaces in between, all right? In between what?
It could be in between crisis and action. It can be in between conflict and dilemma and choice. It can be between making a decision to pull an item off the shelf at the market. I need that product, but before I do, I'm in between making a decision if I'm going to pull that product off, and then how important it is for me to think in between that space. I use that example intentionally because when we encounter moments all day long between awareness and action, and it doesn't have to be crisis or dilemma, any moment of awareness, between awareness and action, that's the space in between, how we are responding to that call, that awareness. All right. So the reason I use the expression of the item on a shelf is because I personally find these opportunities all day long. I'm morally outraged with a lot of things that are happening in our country here. And so, I know my dollar is my vote. So what I buy is my vote. And so I need that product, but oh gosh, it's made of non-recyclable plastics, and its parent company is someone who funds an initiative that is destroying our planet. So I recognize, that is, the moment of awareness and the moment of choice. I put the item back down and go find another product. So it can be anything. And also, Richard, it's the evolutionary growth spurt that we're in right now. This time and space where we are, first time on the planet that we might have experienced this for at least 2,500 years. And physicists are coming to this conclusion, not just us visionaries or future thinkers. It's science.
We're talking with Sandy Hart, and she has a book called The Liminal Odyssey, the alchemical power of the space between. And we are going to continue talking with her, reminding you of her website, liminalodyssey.com. We will be linked to that website as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're here with Sandy Hart, who is sharing with us some definitions of some terms. And some would say, well, boy, you skipped right over the one word we don't know what it is, unless you've Googled it. Liminal. What is the definition of liminal in the context of what we are talking about here today?
Well, if you look up liminal in the dictionary, it basically refers to the word threshold. It comes from the word threshold. And that threshold is that space, right? Where we make a decision. We're stepping, in from awareness into action. And by the way, we step over thresholds all day long in a trance, not even realizing we're making choices and doing and saying things. The reason why that word was so important to me was because it invites us to really step into the threshold not over it. And that requires awareness. But I have to say that architects use the word liminal to describe hallways, staircases. There's a wide range of other uses for the word, but generally speaking, it means threshold. And I had only learned this word about 1.5 years ago. I didn't know what the word meant. I found it clunky to say. Everybody will find it. I always got my M's and my N's confused. But when I started thinking about that word and this one experience I happened to have had in 1982, a story I've been trying to tell, but I just kept putting it down because I didn't have enough of a story to tell. I started thinking more about this word, and as I'm writing, I'm going, oh wow, what was going on? What was that moment of choice? What was that threshold that I was at in that moment in that story? And before I knew it, I had about 50,000 words and ultimately a book. And I went on the Odyssey. I brought myself into that Odyssey and wrote about it along the way.
Fascinating stuff. And some of the other things that I have picked up on here as we have been talking are some of the things that you have created, some of the things that you facilitate and have facilitated for a number of years. But you also carry with you several different titles, mother, grandmother, wife, aunt, and sister from, of course, as it says here, the steep seaside cliffs in Southern California. And you are involved with something that I'm rather intrigued intrigued by, as far as what you founded here, a women's interfaith grassroots international organization called S.A.R.A.H. That's an acronym, folks, for the Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope. Now, that is something that is so fascinating to me because I worked for 15 years in the 80s and early 90s at the height of televangelism for a Christian radio station. And boy, did I learn a lot. You thought politicians and car salesmen were sleazeballs. More on the national level, mind you. Okay. Than on the local level. The people that I associated with on the local level were pretty nice folks. They really were. But what I found during that time was the lack of compassion within, specifically, obviously, the Christian community for those people who actually, and if you want to put it in this context, genuinely belonged in the church. And it wasn't the saved. And yet, what did they do? They excluded, quote unquote, the sinner. Anybody who did not match up to their idea of what was a saint. You know, if they weren't saved and washed by the blood and so on and so on and so on. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. This is not, and then when I think back to my reading of the Bible and the New Testament especially, I'm thinking, who were the very people that Jesus the Christ hung around with? It wasn't the saints. It was those who were, and again I say perceived, as being the sinners. Those who were living in ways that did not match up with what the powers that be at the time wanted them to live by. How? And I'm curious as to this organization, and I know you also have a blog in this regard too. How did Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope come about?
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up S.A.R.A.H. Our 20-year anniversary is next month, so it's very exciting and that we're still thriving. And I have to say, before I do respond to that question, that there are two motivations in life. There's fear and then there's love. And as a Jewish woman, I know that Jesus stood for love, right? The embodiment of love. And that's all I'll say about that. Yeah, anything else is fear. And that's okay. You know, it's all part of the community. It gives creative tension to the rest of us who are working really hard at creating a more compassionate community. And so S.A.R.A.H. So, well, I woke up the morning of 9/11 to the same scene everybody else was seeing. And I say morning, I was in Southern California at the time. And before I could really open my eyes, I heard gather women. I'm like, okay, I didn't know who was broadcasting this to me. I didn't know that I was spiritually inclined. I was the director of sales and marketing for a major home builder. And I was, wrapped up in my kids' lives. And I was an excellent soccer and basketball mom. And, just kind of going through the motions as being a busy mom or busy working mom. And so I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these women when I get them? And where am I supposed to find them? But I just kept following the yes. And before I knew it, I happened to have been invited into some living room dialogues at the Orange County Human Relations Commission. There in Southern California had brought together 32 groups revolving around the county, comprised of interfaith people, Sikhs and Muslims and Christians. And the one group I was in was specifically Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. And it was Episcopalian in terms of Christianity, and the Islamic Center of Orange County, and my synagogue at the time, Temple Bethel. And the conversations were so heart expanding, and I realized how little I really knew about the world and myself. And that in that time. But in the meantime, I found the women. That's where I kind of extracted the women and said, hey, let's have our own conversation. And we did. And a couple months later, I had 12 women in my living room. And now we're several thousand women all over the world. But we've really were, we were called on all the time as the women of the community. We were the mothers of the community. When there was something going on, when the Wisconsin Sikh Gurdwara there was a massacre there, we responded spontaneously, and we were on their, in their parking lot with about 300-400 people with candles. We would mobilize the community to show up in prayer. We were invited into onto panel discussions, and we did a lot of community events through all the colleges and universities in that area. We did a weekend of community service, which I call covert interfaith community building.
I like that.
What we would do is we would mix up different faiths, and we'd say, go, you guys go clean the beach, and you guys go pack food at the food pantry, and you guys do this. And we collected food in front of supermarkets. We collected literally tons of food every weekend. Of course, it was gone by Tuesday when we delivered it on Sunday, sadly. But anyway, we did that for about 7 years. So, oh gosh, we present all over the world. So we just kind of grew organically. No way did I design this. All I did was get out of the way and provide a living room or family room for circle conversations. And we let the circle show us who we were. It's really, and it still continues to blow my mind. Now we just got off of a year-long series addressing the Beijing 12 critical areas of concern out of the United Nations, the UN Women's Beijing Platform for Change, which are issues, 12 issues that address all the issues for and by women. So that's on our website. We've taken a little bit of an ebb year because we flowed so heavily. Now we're kind of taking a little break, which is perfect timing for me to do this work. So yeah, that's a mouthful, and you can tell I'm kind of in love with S.A.R.A.H. Still.
Sandy Hart, my guest here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking about the Liminal Odyssey here on the program as we talk about new paradigms for a new world. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And we are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Don't forget about the special edition, which is on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. And we have podcasts. They're on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeart, let's see, Amazon Music, and we're on YouTube where you can watch these interviews. I hope you will. Do a little producing up at the front and the back ends, but for the most part, we go straight on through and let you hear what our guests have to say. In this case, we're talking with Sandy Hart, who also serves on the Women's Task Force for the Parliament of the World's Religions, as well as the founder and, of course, serves as the director for the international organization, the Charter for Compassion's, I think I've got that right, Compassion's Women and Girls Sector. And it's really a pleasure to have you with us here on the program today. I was born and raised into a family, a total of 8. Mother, father, 4 sisters, and 1 brother. So I've been living in what I like to call, although they will not say that it was a matriarchy, if you're outnumbered, you kind of lean that way. And it's not to say that they threw their weight around. Don't get me wrong. That wasn't the point. But I learned a lot. Maybe it's part of the reason why I have the fairly good understanding of where things are going and what's happening. And I know too, Sandy, that you would agree that the women of the world, let alone the women of this country, are not looking to take over, but they're looking to collaborate, to join forces with the masculine, the feminine with the masculine, kind of like the, what is that Chinese symbol? The yin and the yang, that's it.
Yeah.
And kind of spin together, to work together, because up to this point, if I can state this correctly, it's pretty much been a boys' world, and
Sure.
I just sit here going, you know what? I wouldn't mind if this was all run by women, because it might be done a whole lot better, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't for the women to take over. And I think that, do you think that that's the fear on the part of a lot of men, especially, who are in positions of power, in positions of control and authority? They think that the women are here to take over.
I think men have been victimized by the system of domination and patriarchy to a large degree of how women have. They are subject to the machismo condition. And they've suffered. I don't know if I can't speak if men are afraid of women taking over. I just know that there is a rising movement of compassionate men in the world. And those conditions that you mentioned of collaborating, cooperating, synthesizing, those are all feminine conditions. Those are all feminine values. That's not gender specific. Feminine does not mean women, and masculine does not refer to male. It's not gender. It's the divine masculine and the divine feminine that we want to spin together. Although women need to be with women and men need to be with men. That's what Carl Jung referred to as, I think I got this right, anima and animas. The importance of men to find their divine feminine and women to balance their masculine. So I can get it why, look at the last feminist movement of the 70s and 80s, no more toys for the boys, and pounding the pavement and ripping off our bras and refusing to cook. That's sort of, we're just matching that same masculine energy. We're just replacing it. Of course, we make strides as women, but it's interesting because in 2005, I think it was, I was invited to Harvard University. I mean, that was, talk about mind blowing, for a conference on the women's interfaith movement post 9/11 initiative. And referring to the fact what Diana Eck, who is the director of religious studies, was exploring as the women's interfaith movement being the next wave of feminism. And I think she was partially right. This next wave of feminism is the same as what appeals to the interfaith community. And that's that we are appealing to our higher and our deeper value systems. It's not just women, and it's not just interfaith. Here's another kind of another thought in that regard. The quantum revolution of the turn of the century, the beginning of the 20th century, where it was discovered quantum physics, right? And we came to understand this, a new understanding of the universe, that we live in a mental universe, that the universe is a billion times its parts. It's just remarkable, the discovery, right? Well, physicists are considering the era we are moving into as a second quantum revolution, because now they're starting to see an expansion of the spaces in between those quantum materials, which is resulting in us being more responsive with our language, being more aware, coming into more of our bodies. And I think it's really our minds catching up with our spirituality. I think that's what's really happening.
One of the things that I have noticed just within myself is my changing perspectives on relationships. I have queried this for many years in regards to, for example, death and dying, and say close family members, relatives, friends, acquaintances, and people I don't even know. And the only time it seems that that I am affected is when I am deeply involved in a relationship with them. Now, that could be my brother, could be my parents, could be my best friend. I always love to say this, who I've known for over 50 years. We've been together through grade school, high school, and college. Anyway, and just recently, I experienced something that I thought was going to be more, devastating, more heart-wrenching, more something. In the grieving process, I lost my eldest sister to cancer. Now, she was only 65. I'm 62. And she passed back on the 29th of March. And I went back to Phoenix in April when they had the memorial. And I sat there and I watched the slide presentation, both of them and so forth. And I had the tears and I had the laughter. It was the best. I have to tell you, it was one of the best memorials I'd ever been to. And I haven't been to that many, thank you. Best balance of laughter and tears. Oh, it was wonderful. But I didn't get hit in the face with something that why her and why? The whole real, and I'm not criticizing anybody for going through the real deep, heart-wrenching emotions and tears and moaning and groaning, and because if that's what you need to do, do it. But it didn't hit me that way because I have never believed that a person who dies is really gone. They're just not in that vehicle anymore, my very first car, a 1973 Plymouth Fury 3. Well, I don't drive that anymore, nor the next car, which was a 1998 Chevy Metro, or the car after that, and so. But I'm still here, So she's still here, and I tagged this programs out by recognizing and acknowledging her too. What about that aspect of these dynamics that we get? I don't know if the word is correct or not, but I do know that in the United States in particular, let's just maybe say the West, we do not want to deal with this subject at all. Mm-hmm. And it also prevents us with dealing with the death of not a person, but a situation. It goes to, I think, your concept of the Liminal Odyssey, that when you cross that threshold, there is a death, if you will, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at most any myths that have a story of a hero that ultimately might die, or somebody dies, and comes back to life. This might sound familiar to you if you're a Christian. From death comes life. And this is something our early agrarian relatives, ancestors understood, that if they put a seed in the ground, it would have to die. It's going to fall apart. Like I said earlier, it's going to disintegrate. It's going to become, it's just going to fall apart. So something new can come. And that's the derivation probably of why we bury our dead.
Yeah.
Right.
By the way, I found it interesting. Someone was I was conversing with them, and we were talking a little bit about some of the Christian philosophy, especially the rapture, and how probably most of the attitude is you want to be buried, because you want your body to be intact, and on and on and on and on at the rapture. And it's like, wait a minute, hold it. It says ashes to ashes, dust to dust. When you bury someone in the ground, the body is going to decay, and over the course of a number of years, there's nothing left but bones. So what difference does it make if you're cremated or buried or or set out to sea, for that matter? Because this thing here, in a manner of speaking, is sort of kind of irrelevant. That's not to say we shouldn't take care of it. I wash my car regularly. I make sure that the oil's changed regularly, check the tire pressure, blah, 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 because I want it to last a long time. I don't want to have to buy another one right away. I don't have any spare parts for this thing. I'm losing parts. I just had my gallbladder removed a year ago, okay? So, and I have 2 teeth that are missing. I'm waiting to get replaced. But it's like, this is not what's real. And you talked about how we moved into the area of quantum physics, right? Which frustrates the bejeebers out of me, because I'm going, what was wrong with the old physics? I mean, why can't you just incorporate what you're calling quantum into physics so we don't have confusion? Because I got to tell you, there are times when I'm very confused about these concepts. So talk to us a little bit about all of this in terms of our understanding of who we really are.
Well, first, I failed to express my sympathy, so I'm sorry about the loss of your sister, and the choices we make and how we process things are very different. Everybody has a different process, and that goes to your point of your question, who we are. Who we are, first of all, our body is our communication system. Yeah, yes, we absolutely, to your point, we have to care for it.
Yeah.
It's our temple. It's our rental, right? We have to care for it.
I like that, rental. And I kind of like Enterprise. It's kind of a nice place to rent from.
Yeah. You want it to last a long time. And you don't get to move on to another one if you outgrow it or something. So you got to make peace with it. And I don't want to brush over the fact that our body is the vehicle in which our soul gets to drive.
Yes.
If we show up in our soul's purpose, so who are we? I think every single one of us, no one's exempt from this, by the way. Everyone's soul landed here, especially right now at this evolutionary growth spurt we're in, with a divine assignment. So who are we? That's what we get to figure out. For me, that's what the Liminal Odyssey is about. I don't like the word guidebook, because I'm not an expert in any of the skills I mentioned. I'm only an expert in my own life. That's why telling my true stories in the book was so important. And these are tried and true. They have merits, scientific, indigenous knowledge, well thought and researched and explored theories that were given to me in most cases by those people themselves, who either either are experts in them or devise them themselves. And I've done a lot of work with the Indigenous grandmothers too, a lot of Indigenous wisdom here that comes from them. And what I do with that information makes me who I am. So that is, for me, the importance of this book for me is that I can really continue to explore who I am. You know, and as long as I'm living in my authentic integrity, as long as I am living according to my highest and deepest value systems, as long as I'm paying attention to those moments in between, as long as I am, you know, surrounding myself with people who love me, why else would I surround myself with anybody else?
Yeah.
And serve me. And if not, there's something there. What have I got to learn from them?
Yeah.
Everything is a lesson. And to your point about death, and I'm so glad you brought that up. We don't do death well.
No.
We don't do death on choice in you know, situations that happen, you know, something didn't work out my way, or somebody died, or relationship is just, it cannot be fixed, you know. Death of 100 different, you know, by 100 different means. But death of the body, death of a loved one, actually the passing on of losing a loved one in that way, and we lose them, we lose their body, and that dimension of relationship. We in the United States, particularly in the Western world, you know, we don't do death well. This is where death doulas come in really handy. And I have to tell you, if you don't mind me sharing this, when my mom died about 3 years ago, and when she was dying, and it was a very long death, and she had to mention she was gone by this part at this point. But while she was laying there for about 2 weeks, really, at some point we just thought she stopped breathing, but then she came in for another breath of air, and then we didn't see her breathing for 5 more minutes, which is the weirdest thing. I sat at her bedside for hours, just fascinated by what she was going through. You know, I've given birth, I've had children, and the process of coming into this world is a wild experience. So why would it be any different leaving? Right? It's got to be fascinating. What is going on in the mind? Where's the body going? Where is she right now? Where's her thoughts? She was constantly reaching out, which I know a lot of people do when they die. There's others there waiting to come get her, but that fascination, I would have sat there and cried for my own loss.
Yeah.
But I was, you know, I saw this as her process. Everything dies.
Yeah.
So it was her process, and it was such a beautiful experience. And I'm so grateful because I had a doula that taught me that.
Yeah. My father said to me once, eat, drink, and be merry in moderation, because nobody gets out of this world alive. And I've taken that to heart. I've been through a couple of situations. As I mentioned, I had my gallbladder removed. I'm losing parts, you know, nothing serious, fortunately, you know, but still parts that I guess just are not necessary. I found out that, yeah, you know, you don't want to lose your gallbladder, but if you do, it's no big deal. And I asked them, okay, so the appendix, the same thing. Could you take it out at the same time? And they said, I'm sorry, we don't do twofers. But the one thing that fascinates me, has always fascinated me, is when someone passes, the first thought that I go to is, I wonder what they're experiencing. What are they doing now? What's happening? And I even thought of that after I had received the phone call that morning. And I actually debated for about half a second as to whether or not to conduct an interview that I had coming up in about 30 minutes from that phone call. And I did. I went ahead and I did the interview. I don't know. It was, well, the show must go on, you know. And but I thought, and we incorporated some of what was happening. And of course, it was extremely early. I mean, we're talking only maybe a half hour to an hour since I had been given the news. Well, I was really ticked off when Michael Jackson passed, because he passed away the day before I think it was my 50th birthday. Something like that. And I was like, you took the wind out of my sails, you son of a gun, you. But I still wondered, what was he doing? What was happening with him? Or I don't know if now when you leave the body, if you become it, there's no gender anymore, it's neutral. And no pronouns, thank you. And I'm not saying that to say I don't agree. When I hear that, I say, no. I'm not going to refer you to as him or her, it or they or them. What's your name? What is your name? Tell me your name. My guest's name is Sandy Hart. Her book is The Liminal Odyssey, and we certainly hope you'll pick up a copy. We're going to be linked to her website, which is liminalodyssey.com. That's liminalodyssey.com. It's the alchemical power of the spaces between, and we kind of have spaces between here on Tell Me Your Story. Those spaces between that we talk about here on the program are usually those spaces between the words or the sentences, the paragraphs, the statements, where we kind of sit there and ponder, that's interesting. And of course, you don't want to have very long spaces in radio or the podcast. Video's okay because, you're still kind of moving around, so they know that the video didn't lock up or something. But I remember Sandy Hart, my guest here on the program, talking about her book, The Liminal Odyssey. I was in a van with some friends. Oh my gosh, this is going back 40 years. And we had just traveled to a metaphysical church or service, if you will. I want to say in Tempe or Mesa or something like that, out just south of Phoenix. And as we're driving back, I don't know, it just hit me, this song that I just started singing this song. And I was singing it, of course, loud enough for everybody else to hear, which is sort of opposite of how I usually am when it comes to singing. It's kind of ironic. I'm a little shy about singing in front of a bunch of people solo, but I got no problem with this. I don't know. There's a certain element, I guess, of vulnerability when you sing as opposed to speak. But there I was.
I don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's probably it too. Yes, exactly. And I'm singing this song, and a dear friend, whose name was S.A.R.A.H, she said to me when I was finished with the song, she says, "Why don't you allow there more space between the lines?" I said, "I don't understand. What do you mean?" And she says, that it's the spaces between, not just the words, but say each of the lines in, say, the chorus or the verse, that really add emphasis to those words. And I had never really thought of it that way before. Is that part of this whole business of the spaces between?
Yeah.
That adds, so to speak, punctuates those things on either side of the between, in the middle, between.
It's the space in between the notes of the music. It's the rhythm of the space of the rhythm in a tango. It's the cadence of a poem. And this is actually what the meaning of the ideogram, the Japanese ideogram Ma, M-A, which is symbolized by the sun between two gates to represent, it's known as nothingness, but it's really everythingness.
Mm-hmm.
I write about this in the book about timefulness. This is a word I coined, timefulness, which is what you're referring to, the timefulness, which gives meaning to the things on either side. In the Torah, first 5 books of Moses that's in every synagogue, handwritten by a scribe on scrolls. I think everybody has seen the Torah.
Yeah.
Or a picture of Torah. If you were to look at a Torah, every Torah that is written intentionally with a certain amount of space in between every letters. every letter, and a space along the edges at the border of the page that are precise and exact and intentional. And it was this, told to me by my rabbi, but if you ask a Jew 2 questions, you'll get 4 answers. So everybody has a different take on something. But it makes such great sense that when the scribe, who has to study his whole life to become a scribe, he has to know like 4,000 Jewish laws before he can actually pick up a quill to write the Torah. I believe that he's really breathing the universal truth into the spaces in between, because at least according to Judaism, we are encouraged to look into those spaces. Those are just words written by man, according to Judaism. It's the spaces in between that are God left for us to explore. This is why Jews argue so much. And the very famous picture of Jews, because we're encouraged to argue and question everything. Yeah. And so, and that's a very famous picture of all those rabbis arguing over the Torah, pointing fingers at each other.
Yeah.
That is what they're doing. Well, it has to have meaning to you.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I remember from the Old Testament, it basically says, and I don't know book, chapter, verse, I'm very sorry, ladies and gentlemen, let us sit down and reason together. Now, you could still say that even with the pointing of the fingers, they're still reasoning together because they're not trying to kill each other. They're all trying to understand. Right. And there's a big difference between each one of them saying, my way is right and your way is wrong.
Good.
I have to tell you, some of my favorite conversations, and I've had several rabbis on this program. I love those conversations because I have an awareness, not a pure knowledge, but an awareness of how much study it takes to become a rabbi. It is not an easy process. You might as well become a doctor. Maybe you can become a doctor rabbi. I don't know. Anyway.
And they're there to lead us to our own understanding of what's there.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing for a teacher to do. And that's what rabbi means. It's a teacher.
Exactly.
So a teacher says, okay, here's what it all is. And here's my perspective, but what's yours?
Yeah.
And, as long as it's rooted in their certain values and, rules, and all rooted, like every religion, as an interfaith activist, this is what it all boils down to. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Every world religion has that same philosophy. It's just the words move around, it's just the one sentence, it says the same thing.
Yeah. S.A.R.A.H Hart is my guest. Her book is the book on it's an odyssey that you can take, and we're going to talk more about the Liminal Odyssey here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and it is really a pleasure to have S.A.R.A.H Hart with us here on the program to share her perspective, as she was sharing just a little while ago, that, hey, I see this and you see that, and I tell you what is not what I think it is. But what do you think it is? And I'm fascinated, certainly by the ancient wisdom teachings, including the Torah, including what, of course, is Christians, the Old Testament and then the New Testament. But I'm also fascinated by some of the questions that I come up with based upon what I have read. We were talking about death and dying earlier, and Paul in the Gospels, in the epistle says, it is appointed to every man once to die and then the judgment. Okay, got it. I understand that. That makes perfect sense. What doesn't make sense is the story of Lazarus. And so then the question I have is Paul wrong, or was Lazarus not dead? I.e., what is the definition of death in the first century? I mean, there's something not quite right here. And then you and I both know that in our present day medical community, we have a definition of death. And usually it has to do with when there's a lack of brain waves that they can monitor with whatever it is they use. And yet people come back from the dead. I mean, we're not even going to get into the stories they tell of their experience. That's a whole other program. But I just find it so fascinating. Again, it goes back to what you were saying before. What's your perspective? What do you think? And what's so interesting is that it is true that every single human being can have their own perspective. All 8 billion people, because no two people have lived the exact same lives. So we have all kinds of different filters that we have put on based upon what we've experienced in this life up to this point.
Right. Right. We're all experts in our own lives.
Yeah.
That's all that we
So
can.
when someone comes up to you and says, Sandy, I don't think you're saved, ready to meet God, and I've had that said to me while working at the Christian radio station, I don't think you're saved, Richard. And I'm just sitting here going, wait a minute, but you just said on the air that it was a personal relationship with God. How is it that you're involved in my personal relationship? I always find that so humorous that other people have to go out and quote unquote try to save souls. And I sit there thinking, why don't you just live your life and be an example instead of pushing the issue? Because that pushes people away sometimes.
It sure does, I think. I want to believe that it's rooted in love, that they're doing it not to be manipulative, that they truly believe in their heart that this is what is going to be the best thing for me, and they can think anything they want.
Yeah.
I am pretty comfortable in how I feel.
Yeah.
I've had Jehovah Witness come to my door, and I said, I'll be happy to talk to you, but the minute you start proselytizing, I mean, I'll feed you. You want to take a load off? You've been walking the neighborhoods, kick your feet up. I'll give you something cold to drink. I did that with Mormon missionaries, and here's a great story. It's also in the book. All my stories are in the book. These young men in their white shirts and black ties were walking back to their bikes on the sidewalk. They noticed I had a shelf of heart-shaped rocks everywhere. And they said, what are these? And they were kind of fascinated by them. And I said, sit back down. And I told them my look and you shall find philosophy. And do you know that those 2 young men who I gave lots of lemonade to, they were definitely hungry, and pita chips, I think. Those 2 young men came back about a couple of weeks later, and they had each gone out and found me a heart-shaped rock.
Oh, wow.
And they said, don't please, and I have those, I know where those rocks are too. They go, please don't tell, because they knew they had heard that I was friends with the bishop in their ward. And he goes, but please don't tell Bishop Tom. And I outed him anyway, because I learned that they're out learning about the world. They're not just proselytizing.
Yeah.
So everybody has their own journey, Richard. I think everybody has their own story, their own confluence of experiences, their own, what make up the fiber of who they are. This is where forgiveness is a great entry point into a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We all just are this, this alchemical collection, if you will, of all of these things that have happened to us in our life and our upbringing and the baggage we carry from ancestral trauma and whatever makes up who we are and how we think. And we've all, I think our soul's purpose is to help us figure it all out so we can ultimately get to what that seed is supposed to be doing.
One of the most gratifying experiences that I have had, not only doing this program, but also the conversations that I would have with the people who would come into the radio station back in Phoenix at the Christian station that I would have conversations with, were those who were curious, even though they had their beliefs, they had their doctrine and dogma that they adhered to, or, that they said that they followed and so forth. I interviewed a gentleman on this program many years ago, born-again, fundamentalist, evangelical Christian, who actually practiced out-of-body experiences. And one of the questions that I asked him was, where in the Bible does it give you permission, if you will, to do that? He says, nowhere. And I was in awe of the man because he was willing to, as the saying goes, step outside the 9 dots and experience something. And I said, have you ever wanted not to come back? He said, oh, no, I've always wanted to come back, but not out of fear. Just I knew I wasn't ready. It wasn't my time. Even though he would have the opportunity not to come back. And so what that told me was, oh my God, there is hope. There is hope that people will not stay locked in. It's just like you said, every person has their own. For example, every Jew believes in Judaism a little differently, and every Christian the same thing, and every Muslim and every Buddhist, and the list goes on. One of my favorite sayings that I learned when I was a Baha'i in the early 1990s. I was a Baha'i for a year and a half. And one of my favorite lines or quotes from Baha'u'llah was, if you reject one of the messengers of God, you reject them all. If you accept one of the messengers of God, you accept them all. And I know that you as a Jew do accept that Jesus was a messenger of God. I don't know if he was the Messiah. I don't know if the Old Testament gave us all the details to say, yeah, this is the guy. Because what I find interesting is, what was the reason why Mary and Joseph were going to Bethlehem? The reason was because they were going to put their names down for the census, to be counted.
Right.
But there's no record, as far as I have been able to find, of them at that time. Now, I may be wrong, but I haven't heard of any census, any documentation proving that they actually did in the first century sign the scrolls, if you will, saying, yep, we are originally from Bethlehem, and the baby, Jesus the carpenter. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why aren't they there? Well, because Herod, they said, I'm going to kill them all up to 2 years. And they hit the road, took their show on the road, so to speak. I just find it interesting, that there's so much information out there that we don't know, and we speculate. I do the same. I speculate. I was going to ask you, and it actually, I'm not going to say it's a stupid question because I don't believe that there are any stupid questions, but it's certainly a question that's kind of odd. For you, what's it like being a Jew, especially a female? Because what is your perceived role in Judaism as opposed to, say, the males?
Well, you were partially right when you said that in Judaism, everybody has a little different of a flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, that flavor is radically different, because there's Kabbalistic, there's Reform, there's Reconstructionist, then there's ultra Orthodox, and
sounds like Christianity.
The very dogmatic,
Yeah.
and structured, and women have to cover their hair. For me, I find Judaism, for me, and I love the Baha'i faith, and I love Islam, and I love Christianity. I call Jesus in my meditation, and self-realization, and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
There's something for everyone. Yet, for me and my religion, which is also tradition and lineage and bloodline, it's impeccable for me because of the opportunity to explore my own understanding of what it means. Now, there's a lot of it. I can't get past some pages in the Torah. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
I love the ritual. I love the process. I love the beautiful. I love to light the candles on Shabbat. I love to have a holiday once a week where I get to just really unplug.
Oh, that's
cool.
cool.
We all can. You don't need to be Jewish to do that.
Right.
So I find a lot of meaning in that, I guess, the agency I have over my own belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And the community, it's just, we're all people anywhere. But when I go to services, when I look for a congregation, I usually go to the Centers for Spiritual Living or a Unity Church, or Self-Realization Fellowship,
Mm-hmm.
because I kind of vibe with that tribe, vibe with that tribe.
Yeah.
But I still love my Judaism and the melodies and just the tradition, just to know that I'm part of a lineage.
Yeah.
And I'm carrying on that bloodline. So as my daughter is, and now my granddaughter.
Wonderful. Sandy Hart's my guest.
I
S.A.R.A.H
love
is.
it. Can I just say thank you for calling me Sarah? Everybody calls me Sarah because of the organization. I take no offense to it. I just want people to be able to find me if you want me. So
Well, but here's the beautiful thing, though. S.A.R.A.H is part of the work that you're doing, Spiritual and Religious Alliance for Hope. So it does fit because you founded it. It came from you. So that's a beautiful thing. And we are here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and I thank you so much for being with us. Sarah, I did it again.
Okay.
And I know you're not offended, but I will tell you that it is, to me, the height of disrespect when people do not refer to the person by their name or mispronounce their name. So it's easy to say Sandy, although I know you have it misspelled because it's supposed to end with a Y, but hey, that's another story. Here's what I know, for example, about Hebrew. And this goes to the point of the power of words. I know that each one of the 22 letters of the alphabet has its own legend. And when you put each of those letters together into a word, it then creates a new legend. Colors, sounds, vibration, and so forth. Story. Words together in sentences, together in paragraphs, chapters, book. Here's the part of the whole issue of the power of words. What is sad is that when it's translated out of the Hebrew, all of that's gone. And I remember in a conversation with a rabbi, yes, and we were talking about one of the laws, one of the 613 laws, Jewish laws in the Old Testament. He said, do you know the context under which this was written? Why this was put down? I said, no, I really don't. And he explained to me the context, not what the law meant, but the reason behind it. And when I thought about it, I thought, well, wait a minute. If the context was this, and here we are in the 21st century, and it had to do with reproduction, I'm going, I don't see how man has interfered with the reproductive process, because back then there were maybe, because I did a little research on populations over the centuries, maybe there were 1 million people on the planet at that time. There are 8 billion people on the planet now. Have we really violated that law? I don't think so, Tim. Oh, that was another thing I was going to mention, too. You talk about men spending time with men and women with women in community and so forth. And I hated the fact that Tim Allen got so castigated over his, men spending time with men and men are pigs and all that kind of stuff. And I loved those jokes. They were really funny because they were actually true. They weren't just stereotypes. They were true. He wasn't anti-woman. He was pro-man, saying guys need to spend time with other guys. I had a men's group in the early 90s.
Oh, really?
And we would go hike. Well, there were only 3 of us. Yeah. But we would go hiking. We used Robert Bly's Iron John as our sort of our primer. Especially talking about the katabasis, because one was going through a divorce, one had been in divorce. I was the only married one at the time. But it's like when guys get together, and I remember hearing stories from John Denver's autobiography where he talked about how he would go out into the wilderness with other men for kind of like a journey quest or whatever they call them, and you come back with stuff that now you can share with your partner or your community, and I thought, wow, that is so profound and so true. That needs to be. I take it that you are able to bring those experiences when you're having your get-togethers with all of these different women's groups and what have you. When you come back home, you've got this sort of overflowing. I don't know if you have the opportunity where you can sit there and share. Well, oh, we did this, and I experienced that, and we talked about and da 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 da, and I have this understanding of. What about your relationship in that regard?
Yeah, my husband's wonderful, and I don't actually, in most cases, never came home because the meetings were always at my house, and he was sequestered upstairs. But he knew when everybody left, there was always so much food. So we would sit around. He'd help me clean up or what have you, or we'd talk about the next day. And yeah, he's I and I also tell this story how I knew what I was looking for when I was praying to find him. I didn't know it was him, of course, but for the condition of my relationship, what I wanted to be. And I was very specific about what I was. When I got very specific, he showed up. So he is divine feminine, sacred listening embodied. So yeah, I'm pretty lucky. He's pretty lucky. Yeah. We're pretty lucky.
Yeah.
So, and he has really given me a lot of latitude. He's supported financially because a lot of, I don't get paid for much of this stuff. So, he's been nothing but supportive and wonderful because he gets it. He gets what we're talking about here, He's already there in terms of evolutionary thinking. He understands that money isn't what's really important here. What's really important is that I found a passion and I get to live it out.
Exactly. I have learned that when my wife has had a particular experience away and we get back together again, I never, ever ask any questions. I wait for her in her timing to share with me. And if she doesn't, and I look at it this way, whatever experience she had, in one sense, that's none of my business. That's her business.
Lovely.
And I think that where we see this all the time, not only in television and movies, but in real life, where the woman comes back and the guy is all over her, like, well, what'd you do? And who'd you talk to? And da-da-da. And it's like, wait a minute, she isn't my property. That's why I hate using the phrase "my wife." I just like, just because I'm not possessive in that sense. In spite of the vows that we took when we were married in 2002, she doesn't belong to me possessively, and vice versa. She's a free moral agent. She can come and go as she pleases, and I have the same position as well. Now, that's not to say that I don't say anything if I'm going to go somewhere, certainly, but I think that that's one of the areas for me anyway that. I don't know. That's when I was asking you earlier about how relationships have changed over the decades, especially in the 20th century to the 21st, where the roles of men and women I think they have evolved. There are some that are struggling with this evolutionary process. They don't like it because they want to stay in control. But it's like, I've never had any control over my first wife, let alone my present wife. And vice versa. So it's like a line in a song. I love her enough to let her go. If that's what she wants to do, then that's what she should do, to be happy. And that's really my goal. I want her to be happy. Now, that's not excluding my happiness. Don't get me wrong. Because I'm taking care of me as well. But I just want her to be happy. And I take it that you and your husband are kind of the same way.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. That is really important. So many people up until I think this shift that we're embarking upon, according to physics and our physicists, I should say, and future thinkers and my whole tribe, that we've been walking through what's considered what Dr. Rianne Eisler, who wrote The Chalice and the Blade and The Real Wealth of Nations and Sacred Pleasure, which I highly recommend we all read. I've read it 3 times, read it, it's so good. It calls it the domination trance. We've all been going through this condition, you know, kind of it from that father knows best, women aren't as equipped to handle things, and then that's shifted in the feminist movement. And I think what's happening right now is in this great awakening, this quantum, you know, revolution, you know, part 2, is we are waking up to the reality and questioning assumptions of the way things used to be.
Yeah.
And that's a really big part of the Liminal Odyssey. Question assumptions. Pay attention to your language, right? You mentioned that more than a few times with our time here together. Paying attention to the language we use, because that's just communication energy. That's just expressing what we think. So we have to think carefully and use our words carefully. You know that architects and home builders don't use the word master for describing a master bedroom anymore.
Oh, really?
They call it primary. Because master carries that domination, you know, of course, slavery and all that.
Sure.
You know, there's a lot of language that needs to be redone. I love, and you'll see this throughout the book, I write careful, care-full, thoughtful. When we think in those terms, the way we'll speak in those ways. And when we do that, you know what ultimately happens? We shift culture. Because culture is nothing more than a collective agreement by all its citizens. So how I behave, which is rooted in how I think and speak. So think and speak carefully.
I could not agree with you more. It really ties into the concept that I have been focused on, that I actually write about in my book, Choices, that words have power. And I've thought about this many years ago. We had a gentleman running for governor in Arizona, and he was a car salesman. And his opponent, in the primaries, his opponent had a legal issue that had been resolved 10 years earlier. But this guy brought it up. This guy decided that he's going to dredge this up in spite of the fact that it had been resolved, and nobody was bothering to check. And he managed to win the primary. And I would share this with people, how I would say, wait a minute, this isn't right. You know, words have power. And you know, what he just did, that was not only unkind, but it was unethical. And they said, "Oh, stop it, Richard! You're being naive. It's just politics." And it's like, no, it's not. It's not just politics. There's an intent there, and the intent is to win the votes to sit on that particular seat, to have the power to do whatever it is that this person wanted to do. So there is no dismissing the words that were used to undermine one of his candidates. That's one of the reasons why whenever I hear a politician during a campaign talking and they start to put down their opponent, I'm done with them. I will not. No, you've lost my vote. You should be talking exclusively about what you are going to do and how you are going to change things. Don't worry about your opponent. It's like with me and operations managerships that I've had over the years, the 40 years I've been in this business. I never care about the opposition, or if you will, or the competition, the other radio stations. I don't care what they're doing. I want us to be better today than we were yesterday, and I want us to be better tomorrow than we were today. You know, and that's my perspective. And one other point is, for example, Sandy, I want you to be successful. in delivering the message of your book, the Liminal Odyssey. Because if you're successful, then I'm successful, but not until.
That makes you a spiritual activist. You're operating in an enlightened self-interest, because what you do by being your full integrity self is making the world better, is making me better.
Yeah.
So when others benefit and when the planet benefits, because everybody benefits, you are a spiritual activist.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you so much for being with us here on the program. Sandy Hart, my guest here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host. And before we wrap things up, Sandy, you have a special offer that you wanted to make available to our listeners.
Yeah.
And viewers, by the way.
Thank you. I would love to offer everybody a discount on the book. If you go to liminalodyssey.com and you'll see listen, buy, shop, I think is what it says. You'll figure it out. And use the promo code Richard D. No space in between the Richard and the D. There's no liminal space in there. So Richard D. And then I'll get you a little discount, free shipping. And then there's also an introductory workshop coming up, a play shop, I call it, coming up on the 28th that I'd love to offer your listeners or viewers for free. And that's the same promo code.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we'll definitely look into that and encourage folks to go to your website. Again, it is liminalodyssey.com, and we will be linked to that website so that people can find out more about you and the work you're doing, get a copy of your book at a discount, folks. Very nice. I really appreciate that. Before I let you go, in addition to thanking you for being on the program, I do have 3 final questions that I like to ask you. I ask all of my guests. But before I do, I want to address you, the listener and the viewer, and say thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., 9 a.m. on Wednesdays for our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. We stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. We have podcasts. They are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and many other locations. And we are also on YouTube where you can watch these videos. And the only reason I ask you to subscribe is so you are notified every time a new podcast or video cast is uploaded. And that's the only reason. I'm not interested in increasing my subscriber number. I just want more people to listen to the program and let you know that, hey, a new one is available. Listen to it if you'd like. And then also we'd like you to participate in the Decade of Perfect Vision, the 2020s. As we ask you to go within and listen to that still small voice. I do not know why, Sandy, but sometimes I get so involved in these interviews, I completely forget about asking the guest about that inner life and how that plays into our conversation. And we'll have you back to talk about that. I think that would be very important to discuss. We also ask that if you can help us out financially, we would greatly appreciate that. We do have a PayPal account. It is for your security as well as ours, and any amount is gratefully appreciated. We will take energetic support as well. And with that, we move on to our 3 final questions for our guest. And the first of those 3, who is Sandy Hart?
Mother, grandmother, daughter, sister, wife.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you are doing now?
I want to see everybody live into their divine assignment.
And finally, what is your life's purpose?
Oh, this is fun because I'm just discovering it at 61 years old. And by the way, I have a friend who also will be 50 years this year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. To live by example, teach, servant leadership. Yeah, it's showing up for me right now.
Wonderful.
It's constantly evolving, but that's a pretty condensed version of it. Yeah.
Well, Sandy, again, thank you so much for being with us on the program, sharing with us the Liminal Odyssey. The Liminal Odyssey is available through liminalodyssey.com. And of course, that promo code is Richard D, and that's no space, no liminal space between the Richard and the D. And again, we thank you for that offer, and hope folks you will take advantage of it, as well as the class that she mentioned a little bit ago. Until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal, and Jeanette, I am listening.